Hi, my name is Sydney Kuster, and I'm here to tell you the story about my grandmother, Fiorina Di Choco, and her life in coming to Canada. In 1942, Fiorina Di Choco's life did not start off easy. Born in a small Italian village called Egnone, she came into a world war and grew up in the aftermath. Her father was a soldier, and her family lived in extreme poverty. The majority of my grandmother's time as a child was spent working on the farm for the family to eat and to sell, and everybody lived without electricity, utensils, or plates. She slept in a barn which housed the animals they lived with downstairs. At 9 years old, Fiorina was part of a massive shift of people coming from Italy to Argentina. This wave would fundamentally shape Argentina, as 62% of their population now claim Italian heritage. Despite having to leave her grandmother behind, this move was really like being home for Fiorina, since so many of the people from her own village were there, and her age made it even easier to embrace Argentinian culture. However, the schooling she had begun in Italy didn't translate so well in Argentina, and her parents got very confused by the process. So, on the first day of my grandmother's second grade, she was pulled out from school permanently to work in the home. This injustice would follow her for the rest of her life, and she would never return to her education. In the next few years, Fiorina would begin her formal working life. At the age of 13, she would begin working as a seamstress for a textile factory that said she looked old enough to be there. In this year of working illegally, since legal age is 14, they paid her mother under the table and money that she would never see. Argentina was not a pleasant place for her during this time. There was an excess of violent crime, discrimination, and a lack of safety in your own home. Money would be hidden in walls, and jewelry could be ripped off from you on your body. In Argentina, there was an unsaid disgust of working women that followed her everywhere. But after all this, Fiorina was still just a working immigrant, someone who was uneducated, underpaid, and who didn't really have the rights to speak up. Then she met a man called Pasquale Di Gioco, another Italian immigrant her age from the same village. She was engaged at 17 and married a year later. Pasquale, a logical thinker and a machinist, was not always searching for more, but ready to take the leap. In the early years of their marriage, they loved dancing and working and building their lives, especially Pasquale. Pasquale loved being around respect and people with power because it was something he knew and something he could classify. Together, they had almost nothing, with the optimism that one day they would have something. That was until someone changed their sights completely to Canada. Pasquale's mother, the wonderfully named Marie Nicola, went to see Pasquale's sister, Lena, in Montreal, and she saw the network of family they were building there. She went back to the two of them amazed and urged them to go. Lena had a real finished house in Montreal, and she paid it with a mortgage instead of brick by brick like they were doing in Argentina. Still skeptical about moving, they decided to try Canada for 1 year. And the very last day before their sponsorship ended, they landed in Montreal, Canada.
When Fiorina came to Canada, it was cold, dark, and very, very cold.
They both had jobs starting the next day, thanks to their family connections and the end of the Second Industrial Revolution. Logically, it was the best time of their lives. But emotionally, they couldn't have picked a worse time to be in Montreal. Quebec was going through huge political turmoil as old British ideals were breaking down and Francophones were holding on for dear life onto their culture more at risk than the influx of West European immigrants. They became targets of an ill thought out political idea, the cultural punching bag of every middleman who needed to express their frustrations. On Fiorina's first day of work, she was called the No Shoes Lady for the day she took to buy winter boots. In her first month of work, she accidentally called her boss a string of offensive things, which her coworker told her meant thank you. They grossly overpaid for furniture by a francophone who basically mocked their lack of Canadian pricing. But it didn't faze Farina much, and in fact, she barely remembers it today. What really struck her was the freedom of these women in Canada. They were shopping, they were living, and it was something she had never seen before. She looked at the American classic beauties and felt like she could be her own Disney princess, the American dream in Canada. She loved that idea, and she had never had that before, and it kept her fighting for her place in Canada. Pasquale, however, was distressed by Canadian culture and actually downright distraught at the stiffness of the culture here. There was no more tango, warm weather, sunshine. There was just cold Quebec noses that seemed to always be turned down on him. Immediately, he planned to go back. While in this back and forth, they had two children, Susie and Robert. Fiorina absolutely refused to go back to Argentina, knowing that she would not feel this hope as a woman again. While trying to find their footing in Canada, they were also relearning parts of Italian culture that they had lost in Argentina. They felt excluded even in the section of town they were excluded to. As Fiorina continued learning both English and French, she pushed her kids to get an English education. The last thing she wanted was for her kids to have the same limits on education that she had had. She was tired of the cultural barriers. If not for herself, then her kids would have it. She wanted them to run as far as they could, to see how far they could make it with just learning all the things she couldn't. Fiorina Di Choco is the type of person to always give everything she has to others. While she might not say she's struggling, she faces challenges with a bravery that can only be earned. Fearless but incredibly powerful. That is the legacy of Fiorina Di Choco, and that is the story of my grandmother's life.